Montana Territory, 1879. The wind howled low across the prairie as the stagecoach door slammed shut behind her, dust clinging to her hem like a curse she could not shake. Savannah Jane stood on the edge of the small town of Dry Creek, gripping the handle of her carpetbag with white-knuckled fingers, her face flushed with shame. The letter that had brought her here, folded twice and worn from reading, was now useless. The man who had sent for her, who promised marriage and a home, had taken one look and said, "You're not what I expected," then turned his back. Just like that. She had been sent away in front of the whole town. No wedding, no welcome, just whispers. Behind her, the stagecoach rattled off in a cloud of dust, leaving her alone on the wooden platform. Across the street, a group of men leaned against the porch rail of the saloon, watching. She held her head higher than she felt. Savannah had been raised to believe in second chances. But today she was not so sure they existed. "You lost?" a deep voice asked. She turned quickly, startled. A tall cowboy stood a few paces away, hat shading his eyes, boots dusted from the trail. His shirt clung to his broad shoulders, and he held the reins of a lean chestnut horse. "I was supposed to marry a man named Walter Griggs," she said, her voice stiff. "He sent for me 2 months ago. Today he told me to go back." The cowboy's mouth pressed into a tight line. "Griggs is a fool." She blinked. "Do you know him?" "Enough to know you deserve better than him." He stepped closer, offering his hand. "Kade Prescott." She hesitated, then placed her hand in his. "Savannah Jane, from Ohio." His grip was firm, steady. She looked up into his face. He was not young, not old either. Maybe 30. His jaw was sharp, but his eyes, blue and steady, held a kind of quiet. "Well, Savannah Jane from Ohio," he said, glancing at her single bag. "You got a place to stay tonight?" "No," the word came out barely a whisper. "I do not." He nodded once. "Then come on. I have a cabin about a mile out. I do not let decent folks sleep in the dirt." She should have said no. She had only just met him. But something in the way he said it plain, without pity, made her believe him. He helped her onto his horse, then led them both down the trail without another word. The silence was easier than she expected, like a blanket pulled over shivering shoulders. The ride was slow, the sun slanting low behind them. They reached the cabin just as dusk fell. A small sturdy home tucked near cottonwoods by a creek. A swing hung from one of the trees, a child's swing. He saw her looking. "My wife passed 3 years ago. I have 2 little ones. They're inside." She turned to him, startled. "You are a father?" He nodded once. "Olive is 6. Oscar is 4. They will be asleep by now. I do not mean to intrude." "You are not." He opened the door for her. "You are welcome." Inside, the cabin smelled of wood smoke and bread. The fire crackled low in the hearth. 2 small beds stood in the corner, the children curled under quilts. Savannah's heart caught in her throat. She looked at him again. "Why are you helping me?" Kade set her bag down gently. "Because no one else did." That night, she lay on a cot near the fire, staring up at the wooden beams. The warmth of the home around her, the soft breathing of children, the quiet strength of a man who had nothing to gain, these things wrapped around her like a balm she did not know she needed. The next morning, Olive and Oscar padded out in bare feet, blinking at her. "Who's she?" Olive asked. "She is a guest," Kade said. "Her name is Savannah." Oscar climbed onto the bench beside her and pointed at her curls. "You look like a doll." Savannah laughed, surprised at herself. "That is the nicest thing anyone has said to me in a long time." By noon, Savannah had helped with the washing, mended a torn shirt, and shared slices of bread with honey with the children on the porch. Kade watched her from where he chopped wood, his eyes soft. "Felt easy." Too easy. I will not stay long, she said that evening, as they sat by the fire after the children had gone to bed. You can stay as long as you need, Kade replied. But you have your hands full already. You do not need me here. Kade shook his head. Those children need someone who sings while she works, who laughs even after being hurt. And he paused. I do not mind you being here. She looked down at her hands. The man who sent for me said I was not what he wanted. I thought, maybe I could belong somewhere. But I do not think I do. Kade leaned forward, his voice low. He saw what he wanted to see. I see what you are. Her throat tightened. And what is that? He looked her straight in the eye. You are a treasure. Her breath caught. Her heart pounded. I do not say things I do not mean, he added. I do not know what to say. You do not have to say anything. I am not asking for anything from you. But as he stood to tend the fire, she looked at him and felt something shift in her chest. Not just gratitude, something deeper, something that scared her a little. That night, Olive curled into her side and whispered, Are you going to be our new mama? Savannah's eyes filled. I do not know, sweet girl. But she wanted to be. Days passed. Then a week. Savannah stayed. She cooked, helped with the children, stitched new curtains for the windows. Kade never pushed, never assumed, but always made her feel seen. He listened when she spoke. He noticed when she was quiet. One morning, she stepped outside and found him fixing the swing. You do not have to do that, she said. I do, he replied. It was broken. And Olive asked if you would push her again. She smiled. She likes me. They both do. He looked at her. So do I. She stood still, heart pounding. Kade, I know I am not what you came here for. I know you came looking for something else. But if you stay, I will not send you away. I will fight for you. Every day. Savannah stepped toward him, until only inches separated them. I think I was sent here for you. His hand touched her cheek, gentle. Then I am the lucky one. And when he kissed her, it was not rushed or desperate. It was steady and sure, like the man himself, like roots taking hold after a storm. She clung to his shirt, tears slipping down her cheek this time not from shame, but from the quiet bloom of hope. He pulled back just enough to whisper, You are my treasure, Savannah. And she believed him, with her whole heart. Rain came late that spring, slow and steady, soaking into the thirsty earth. Savannah stood at the window, sleeves rolled to her elbows, watching the gray sky stretch over the hills. Olive and Oscar were bent over a sheet of paper at the table behind her, heads close together, drawing something with charred sticks Kade had shaved down for them. A quiet filled the cabin, not silence, but the soft kind born of trust, like the hush of a church after prayer. Kade stepped through the door with his hat dripping and a coil of rope slung over one shoulder. You'll catch cold, Savannah said, taking the wet hat from his hands. He shrugged out of his coat, rain beating off the oilcloth. Had to lead the mare back from the fence line. She's favoring her back leg. She limping bad? Enough, I'll keep her close to the barn. Might need to wrap it. Savannah hung the coat near the stove and returned to the table. Would you like me to help? Kade glanced toward the window, then back at her. You've already done more than I could have asked. I didn't ask what I've already done. He smiled faintly. All right then, after supper. Later, when the children were tucked in, and the sky still wept quiet over the land, they walked to the barn together. Mud clung to their boots, and the air smelled of wet hay and leather. Savannah held the lantern steady while Kade crouched beside the mare, his hands gentle as he examined the leg. She's not broken, he said, just stepped wrong. Savannah passed him a strip of cloth. How did you learn to tend animals like this? My father ran cattle down near Gallatin's edge. He taught me what he could before he passed. The rest I learned by doing. He didn't say the year, but she sensed it had been young. The way he moved, quiet and certain, told her he'd carried more than one burden before he was ready. I would have liked your father, she said, watching him wind the cloth around the mare's leg. He would have liked you. He always said a good woman doesn't need fine clothes, just a steady heart. The mare shifted and nickered. Kade stood slowly, brushing his hands against his trousers, his shoulder brushing hers as he reached for the lantern. Do you miss Ohio? He asked as they walked back toward the cabin. I miss my sister. She was the only one who didn't judge me when I answered that letter. She write you? She can't. Her husband forbade it. Savannah's voice tightened. Said I embarrassed the family. Kade didn't answer right away. His silence didn't feel empty, though it felt like space made for her to speak more if she wanted. I was raised with rules, she said. What a woman should be, should say, should wear. I followed every one of them and still ended up thrown out like a broken dish. You're not broken. I know that now. And what do you want to be, Savannah? Now that nobody's telling you what to do. She stopped walking. Rain pattered on the sodden grass around them. I want to be someone who matters. I want to build something real. Even if it's small. Kade stepped close enough that she felt the warmth of him through the damp air. You already matter. And there's nothing small about what we're building. She didn't speak, but she didn't move either. Her hand lingered by her side, and he didn't touch it, but he didn't have to. The space between them said enough. Inside, the fire had died low. Savannah stirred it back to life while Kade rinsed his hands at the basin. She handed him a towel. Olive asked me if I'd teach her stitching tomorrow, she said, folding the cloths from supper. She's never taken to it before. She said she wants to make something pretty. Kade dried his hands, then leaned against the edge of the table. You've brought something into this house I didn't know we were missing. I didn't bring anything, she said. It was already here. I just dusted it off. He didn't smile, but something in his eyes softened. I'll be riding into town day after tomorrow, he said. Need seed and a new bit for the plow horse. She nodded. Do you want company? I'd like it, but only if you're ready. Savannah didn't answer right away. The thought of returning to Dry Creek turned her stomach, but not with fear, something more like pride, bruised but healing. I think I am, she said. I think I'd like to be seen standing beside you. His gaze held hers, steady and unflinching. Then we'll go together. That night, the wind quieted, and the rain slowed to a hush. Savannah sat by the hearth, brushing Olive's hair while the girl leaned sleepily against her. Oscar curled beside Kade, head resting on his leg, already half dreaming. She looked across the room and met Kade's eyes. He didn't speak, didn't need to. His hand moved gently through his son's hair, and in that quiet moment, with the children safe, the walls warm, and the storm fading, Savannah felt something root deep inside her. Not belonging. Home. The wagon rattled over the muddy track into town, wheels groaning as they hit slick ruts from the recent rains. Savannah held Olive close beside her on the bench seat while Oscar sat between them, clutching his carved wooden horse. Kade drove in silence, eyes scanning the road ahead, reins steady in his hands. The canvas-covered wagon bed behind them held dry goods to trade and a bundle of wool Olive had outgrown, tied with twine. Dry Creek emerged from the mist in low outlines, the blacksmith's forge smoking faintly, the roof of the mercantile patched with new shingles, the livery doors yawning open. Savannah's pulse quickened, but she kept her chin level. No one would look away first this time. Stay close to me, Kade said, keeping his voice low so only she could hear. I intend to. He nodded once, then pulled the team to a stop beside the post outside the mercantile. Savannah lifted Oscar down while Olive scrambled to the ground on her own, brushing her skirt smooth. Inside the store, the air was heavy with tobacco and flour dust. An older man behind the counter, tall, with hunched shoulders and a sour mouth, paused mid-measure as they entered. His eyes flicked to Savannah, then narrowed. "Well, I'll be," he muttered. "Thought you'd hightailed it out of here." Kade stepped forward before she could answer. "We're here for seed barley and saddle soap. 2 pounds of sugar if you've got it." The man didn't look away from Savannah. "You bring her back for show or shame?" Kade's hand dropped to the counter with a soft thud. "I came here for supplies. You got them? Or should I take my coin to Billings?" The man grunted and turned to the shelves. Savannah let out a slow breath. Olive took her hand, small fingers curling into hers. "Papa." Oscar tugged Kade's trouser leg. "Can I get peppermint drops?" Kade looked at Savannah. "What do you think?" She crouched beside Oscar. "If you carry the sugar sack back to the wagon, I think you've earned a few." Oscar beamed. They paid in coin and left the store with 3 burlap sacks and a paper twist of peppermint candies. Outside, the sky had begun to clear in streaks of pale gold. Kade secured the sacks in the back while Savannah walked with the children to the watering trough. A voice called from across the road. "Miss Jane." She turned, startled. A woman in a sun-faded dress stood on the boardwalk, apron dusted with flour. Her cheeks were plump, hair pinned back in a fraying bun. "You remember me? Nettie Rowe. I was there when Griggs made a fool of himself." Savannah hesitated, unsure what answer the woman wanted. "I just wanted to say," Nettie continued, "you held your head high. That mattered. Some of us saw." Kade approached, touching the brim of his hat politely. Nettie gave him a small nod. "Well," she said, tucking a loose strand behind her ear, "you two look right settled." Savannah glanced at Kade, who was watching her, not the woman. "We are," she said. Nettie smiled, then turned back toward the bakery. Later, as the wagon rolled back toward home, Kade spoke without looking over. "You did fine in there." "I didn't shake," she said. "I thought I would. I never doubted you." They rode on in quiet for a stretch. The wind had softened, moving in gentle gusts through the grass. Olive hummed in the back, arranging wildflowers into a bundle. Oscar had fallen asleep against the sacks, mouth sticky with peppermint. Savannah turned toward Kade. "What happened to the woman who helped you after your wife passed?" He glanced over. "Sarah? My sister-in-law. She stayed 1 winter, then moved back east. She was young, wanted a life of her own." "Was it hard when she left?" "It was harder before she came, but yes." Savannah folded her hands in her lap. "I've been thinking about staying." Kade didn't speak at once. The wheels creaked through the mud. "I don't want to be just a guest," she said. "And not just for the children." He drew the team to a slow stop at the edge of the clearing near the cabin. The cottonwoods rustled in the breeze, and the light slanted gold against the bark. "I've never been a man for big speeches," he said finally. "But I know what I want, and I know what I've found." She stepped down from the wagon, skirts brushing the grass. He followed, standing close enough she could see the flecks of sawdust still clinging to his sleeve from the morning chores. "If I asked you to marry me," he said, "it wouldn't be out of gratitude or need. It would be because I see you, for who you are, and I want to build a life with you." Savannah looked down at her hands, then back at him. Her voice was quiet but sure. "Then ask me." He took her hand. "Savannah Jane, will you be my wife?" "Yes," she said, the word blooming like warmth in her chest. He didn't kiss her then. Not yet. But his hand tightened around hers, and they stood for a long moment beneath the trees, the children still asleep in the wagon, the sky clear above them. The road behind them was gone. What lay ahead was theirs to shape, together. The wedding was quiet. Savannah stood beneath the cottonwood with a ribbon of pale blue at her waist, the only bit of color she owned that hadn't faded under hard use. Olive had woven wild asters into her braid that morning, her tongue poking from one corner of her mouth in concentration as she twisted the stems. Kade waited beside her, a pressed shirt under his vest and his boots newly oiled. He had shaved, though he'd nicked his chin in 2 places. Reverend Tabor from the neighboring homestead read from a small leather-bound book, his voice steady as the breeze. Olive held Oscar's hand and kept him from squirming. They stood in a half-circle of neighbors, Nettie Rowe among them, her apron fresh and hair tidied for the occasion. Kade's friend Eli, who came the night before with a bundle of firewood and a bottle of something sharp, tipped his hat when the vows were done. Savannah said, "I do," with her eyes locked on Kade's. His hand around hers was warm, steady. When he kissed her, it was not long, not showy, but it trembled her knees. Afterward, they served stew and cornbread on the porch. The children ran barefoot in the grass, Olive's braids coming loose. Oscar lost his second front tooth chewing on a dried apple and proudly showed everyone the gap. By dusk, the neighbors had gone. Kade walked the last guests to their wagons while Savannah rinsed the dishes at the pump. Her wedding band caught the fading light, a simple gold loop he'd traded a sack of oats and a few hours fence mending for. Inside, the cabin brimmed with a fullness she hadn't known she needed. Not noise, not bustle, just the weight of belonging. The quilts on the bed were turned down. The fire in the hearth was low but steady. Olive had fallen asleep with her head on Savannah's lap during the last lullaby, and Kade had carried her to bed without waking her. Savannah stood at the window, watching the last of the sun slip behind the hills. Kade came up behind her, his hand brushing her back. "You warm enough?" he asked. She nodded. "It's the kind of full quiet I used to dream about." He leaned his shoulder against the frame. "I didn't know I could feel this settled again." She turned toward him. "You said you'd fight for me." "I meant it. You don't have to anymore." His brow furrowed slightly. "Why not?" "Because I'm not going anywhere." He cupped her cheek, thumb resting at her jaw. "You sure?" "I've never been more sure." His lips found hers again, slower this time, deeper, the kind of kiss that says thank you without words. When they pulled apart, she rested her forehead to his. "I want to learn the land," she said. "What grows best, how to keep the chickens from wandering too far. I want to help build more than just inside this cabin." "You will." His voice was low. "You already are." She smiled against his chest. "Do you think I could try making cheese?" Nettie said she'd show me. "Long as you don't mind the smell, I'll eat whatever you make." The laughter came easy between them now. Not loud, but rich. Later, when she lay beside him, the windows opened to the sound of night insects and the distant creek. Savannah reached across and took his hand. "Was she gentle?" she asked. Kade's eyes opened in the dark. "Your first wife. Was she kind to you?" He didn't answer at once. "She was. But she was never meant for this life. She tried, though. I was young. We were both trying to be what we thought we should." Savannah nodded, her fingers brushing his. "I'll never try to be anything I'm not," she said. "And I don't expect you to either." He turned to her fully, one arm pulling her close. "That's all I've ever wanted." The fire crackled low. The night deepened. When morning came, Olive and Oscar burst into their room without knocking, breathless with excitement because a hen had laid an egg in the woodpile, and it was blue-speckled. Savannah rose laughing, wrapped in her shawl, and followed them out to see it. Kade lingered in the doorway, arms crossed, watching her kneel in the damp grass. The children curled close, all 3 of them marveling over the warm shell in her hands. He felt something settle in his chest then. Not new, but finally named. She was his treasure. Not because she'd come all the way from Ohio, not because she'd stayed when she could have run, but because she saw this life, its roughness, its quiet, and chose it. Chose him, chose them, and he would carry that choice and her through every season that came. A late summer heat settled over the land, the kind that made the creek run slower and the barn smell of sun-warmed hay. Savannah stood at the edge of the garden with her toes in the soil, a wide-brimmed straw hat shading her face as she trimmed back the bean vines. Olive sat nearby, carefully threading her needle through a square of muslin. "She's crooked again," Olive said, holding up her stitching. Savannah leaned over. "It's not crooked. It's learning. I want it to look like yours." "Well, mine didn't look like mine when I was your age either." Kade approached from the direction of the pasture, his shirt damp from work and a small bundle of something in his hand. He stopped beside her, brushing a curl from her cheek. "Found this near the fence line," he said, offering a cluster of wild raspberries wrapped in a folded kerchief. Savannah blinked. "They're early. Birds haven't gotten to all of them yet." She took one between her fingers, the juice staining her thumb as she bit into it. "You always know when I need something sweet." He didn't answer, just watched her eat one. Then another, the corner of his mouth tugging up slightly. "I was thinking," he said after a moment, "if the rains hold off, we could ride to the foothills in a few days. Stay the night. Let the little ones camp under the stars." Savannah brushed her hands on her apron. "Oscar's been asking about sleeping outside. Keeps trying to build a tent out of quilts. I figured it's time he sees what the sky looks like without a roof in the way." She nodded. "Let's do it." That evening, she packed biscuits and dried apples, wrapped cheese in waxed cloth, and tucked a small tin of matches into Kade's coat pocket. Olive insisted on bringing the half-finished sampler. Oscar carried a bundle of sticks he declared would be for the biggest fire ever, though Savannah quietly replaced them with dry kindling before they left. They rode out at dawn 2 days later, the sky pale with morning and the grass still damp underfoot. Kade led the way on the chestnut mare, Olive riding behind him with her arms around his waist. Savannah followed on the gelding, Oscar snug in front of her, pointing at every hawk and squirrel they passed. By midday, they reached a clearing near the stream, sheltered by a stand of old pines. Kade dismounted and tied both horses to a low branch, then helped Savannah down, his hand lingering at her waist. "This spot do?" he asked. She looked around the ring of trees, the soft moss underfoot, the hush of water nearby. "It's perfect." Oscar ran off to collect rocks, and Olive unpacked the sampler again, choosing a spot in the sun. Kade laid down their bedrolls and built the fire circle with flat stones while Savannah spread the cloth for supper. That night, the sky opened wide, stars spilling across it like scattered salt. The fire snapped and hissed, and the children, warm under their quilts, drifted to sleep between them. Savannah leaned into Kade, her shoulder against his, both of them staring upward. "I never imagined I'd have this," she said softly. "Not just a home, but peace." "You earned it," he said. "Every bit of it. I used to think the only way to be safe was to be small, quiet, invisible. You're not invisible anymore." She turned, her hand resting on his chest. "I don't want to be. Not with you." He kissed her then, not hurried, but full of the quiet certainty that had always been the way he loved her. She answered it with her whole body, her palm cupping his cheek, her breath catching against his. They made love beneath the stars, wrapped in the hush of night and the scent of pine and smoke. No walls, no expectations. Just skin and trust and the weight of all they'd built between them. By morning, the sun filtered through the trees, golden and slow. Olive stirred first, crawling into Savannah's blanket with cold toes and a sleepy smile. Oscar woke with pine needles in his hair and asked for biscuits before his eyes were open. They rode back that afternoon, quiet and close, the children dozing against them in the saddle. When they reached the cabin, the porch bathed in late daylight, Savannah dismounted and turned to Kade. "I want to plant fruit trees," she said. "Peaches, maybe. Apples for cider. I'll dig the holes. And a window box for herbs, so the kitchen smells like rosemary in winter." He nodded. "Tell me what you want. I'll make it happen." "You already have," she said, reaching for his hand. He lifted it to his lips, kissed her knuckles gently. They went into the house together, the children trailing behind, already arguing about who got the last slice of pie. Savannah lit the lamp, its glow spilling soft across the table. Kade pulled off his boots and stacked them by the door. That evening, she read aloud from a worn book while Olive stitched and Oscar listened with his thumb in his mouth. Kade carved a new handle for the kitchen knife, his hand steady, the shavings falling like curls of smoke. When the fire burned low and the children slept, Savannah poured warm water into the basin, bathed her hands, and stood at the window. Kade came up behind her, his chest against her back, arms circling her waist. "Do you think they'll remember this?" she whispered. "They'll remember love," he said. "That's what stays." She leaned back into him, her eyes closing. And that was the shape their life took in the seasons that followed. Quiet, steady, full. They cleared more land, planted fruit trees along the southern edge of the pasture. Savannah's herbs grew thick in the box beneath the kitchen window, and Olive stitches straightened with each month. Oscar carved whistles from twigs and learned to fish with his father's hand guiding his own. Savannah taught at the schoolhouse come spring, 3 days a week. Kade built her a desk from old barn boards, and she kept a jar of wildflowers on it, always fresh. In time, they added a room to the cabin and a cradle to that room. Savannah's hands stayed busy, her heart full. Kade never stopped watching her like she was the first sunrise after a long storm. They grew old together in that house by the cottonwoods. And though there were hard years and lean ones, they never faced them alone. He called her his treasure until the day he died. His hand in hers, the orchard blooming just outside. And even years later, when Savannah rocked her grandchild on the porch, the scent of rosemary drifting from the window, she could still feel the warmth of Kade's hand at her back, steady as ever. Because some kinds of love don't fade. They root deep and carry on.